I'm here to share an OER fairy tale. Because back in 1999, before it was even a thing, actually, open educational resources touched my life and charmed me, and I've been living with enchanted things happening in my life ever since. And what happened then was, Alan Downey wrote a book called How to Think Like a Computer Scientist. And he released it under the GPL. So since people were not familiar with the GPL, how many people here know about the Creative Commons? Okay, so the GPL stands for the GNU Public License. And it comes from the free software movement. And it's also known as copyleft. And the idea of copyleft is it's copyright turned upside down. And in 1993, when I was enrolling in a grad program in computer science, I discovered the GPL and I fell in love. Because immediately I recognized that the GPL was an attempt to decommodify learning. And I was seeing the horrors of commodification of everything everywhere. And I just thought, oh, this GPL is just the most wonderful thing. And I got involved in the free software movement at that time. And so I was coming to OER actually as a computer teacher involved in the free software movement. And so Alan Downey's book was released under the GPL because there was no Creative Commons. And he designed this, it's a wonderful book. He designed it with these goals in mind. He wrote it for his students. So he wanted to keep it short because he thought it was much better for students to read 10 pages than to not read 50. And many of you have looked at some of the commercial computer books. If you've seen them, they're tomes that they have to republish every couple of years so that there's a new edition so they can sell you yet another book. And they don't really enhance learning in any particular way. Be careful with the vocabulary. Minimize jargon and define each term. So build gradually. And focus on programming, not the programming language. Now, he wrote this book for a course he was teaching, and he used Java as the programming language. So this was a book written to teach programming, but using Java. Meanwhile, down in Arlington, Virginia, I was teaching high school computer science for Arlington Public Schools. And I was confronted with a problem. I already mentioned the GPL and my love for free software. I was desperately looking for a new programming language. And I'll explain why I was looking for a new programming language. Because there's this thing called the Advanced Placement Computer Science that we have in the US. It's a standardized test that students take across the country to get college credit while they're in high school. And so it's called AP. And AP Computer Science used a programming language called Pascal, which was a wonderful language for teaching people to program. But in 1998, they actually switched to C++, which is a terrible language for teaching people to program. So I was stuck. What am I going to do with my first year students? Because we were offering AP in the second year. I can't possibly use C++ as the first language. I need something else. And Pascal is kind of showing its age, and I'm connected to the free software movement. So what should I do for a new programming language? And I chose Python. And I chose Python for a number of reasons, and more people were familiar with Python than they were with the GPL. But Python, when I started, was a small little community of programmers, and Python has this magical language that people say you come for the language and you stay for the community. It's a programming language by programmers for programmers. It was built in the open source environment. People who created the language were making it for themselves. And they built this wonderful community. And this is Michael McClay, who is a scientist who was working at NIH, and he helped bring Guido von Rossum, the creator of Python, over to the Virginia area. So actually they all came right near where I live, and they started growing this Python community there. And Python is easy to write, easy to read. It's with low floor, high ceiling. I mean, there's a lot of great reasons why Python is a wonderful language to teach programming with. And so I chose that language because I had met Michael McClay at a Linux Install Fest in 1995 at NIH, where I was bringing my computer to try to get Linux working on it. And he was raving about this language, Python. But at the time, Pascal was working just fine, didn't need to make a change. So I said, oh, I absorbed his enthusiasm, but I didn't have a need. But then in 1999, I had a need because C++ was a nightmare. So what am I going to do? I went back online and a whole bunch of people said, oh, you should just use Python. You should just use Python. So, and then I asked a student of mine, at Matt Ahrens, who was a senior. I said, Matt, can you check out this new language and let me know what you think about it? And he did this for a senior project, and he came back to me raving. He said I could do more with Python in 3 months than I could with C++ in 2 years. So I was hooked at that point, and I spent the summer right after that saying I'm going to learn Python, and I'm going to teach starting next year with Python. But there was a problem. There were no books to teach Python with. There were only a couple of books, a handful of books that even existed in 1999 with Python. Here's pictures of them. And they were all about the language, not about programming. So, which makes total sense. I mean, it was a small language community, and they had written some books for programmers who wanted to learn the new language. But I needed a book to teach beginners how to program. So what am I going to do? Well, Richard Stallman, the father of the free software movement, I was involved in I had emailed him back and forth, and he introduced me to Alan Downey. He said, Alan Downey has this book, How to Think Like a Computer Scientist. I took a look at it. This is a wonderful book. And while I don't feel like I could write a textbook on my own to start out with at this point, I could take Alan Downey's book and turn it from a Java book into a Python book. And for people who know programming, that's not so hard to do. I mean, computers do what computers do, and programming languages all are working on the same machine. So they're not that different. And here I had a book with a bunch of topics and questions, and all I had to do was rework it from a Java book into a Python book. And because of that, and because he had released it under the GPL, I had the rights to do it. So I did. And what happened next was really pretty amazing for both Alan and I. I mean, we ended up meeting online. It was years later. We finally met at a Python conference. But I converted the book into Python. He's now the author of dozens of books that O'Reilly publishes and in the introduction to his Think Python, which is the latest iteration of this book, he said he had the strange experience of learning a new language by reading his own book. So that was pretty cool. So what basically, we were doing this 3 years before OER, the term was coined, and it just, because we were at the right place at the right time, Python was exploding as a language. I mean, it went from a little tiny community to being the most popular programming language in the world. So just to ride that magical, story has been exciting. And because of where we were and when, because of OER, we were able to play a role in that. Because How to Think Like a Computer Scientist ended up on MIT's free software courseware resources. It was, it was released and remixed. I've just watched it. There are now interactive versions online. You can go and see all of the things that just came out of that. By sharing, I mean, sort of give and you get back. It's a pretty amazing thing. And one of the things, another OER that I wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Chuck, because he took a remix of our book and turned it into Python for everybody. And now he's got a whole series of videos online, all Creative Commons. I end up using a lot of his materials now in the courses that I'm teaching. So again, he credits Alan with having inspired him to do this in the beginning. So that was also very exciting. So that's the story. I mean, I've met people, I've gone to Python conferences, I've had Guido come into my classroom, I've done all of this stuff because open educational resources brought me to an open book, which brought me to the Python community, and it's just been so joyful. I don't know that I would still be teaching high school were it not for the joy I get out of being part of all of this process. So I'm a couple years from retirement, although if I keep having fun, I may never retire. Who knows? We'll have to see how it goes. But I have this goal. So I'm part of what's a dual enrolled program, which is a thing we're doing in the U.S. where high school students get college credit. So we offer an associate degree, which is a 2-year degree. I don't think you have it here in the UK, so it's a little different. But we have this community college system all across the US, and it's the first half of a bachelor's degree. And you can do it more affordably at a local school. So I am an adjunct at Northern Virginia Community College because my students, who are high school students, also get college credit. And in fact, we offer an associate degree in computer science concurrent with high school. Part of this isn't really a good story. It's because it's getting so expensive, higher education, and in the US, the only place you have control over education to keep the cost down is public education. So they're pushing higher ed into K-12, right? They're pushing it into the high schools because they can do that. So, so anyway, not all my students are ready, but those that are getting associate's degrees in computer science along with their high school diploma. And the Northern Virginia Community College, which is part of the Virginia Community College system, has rolled out a wonderful new associate degree. I'm pretty impressed with the work they've done. And it's going to have these 5 courses and that are part of the associate's degree. And what I want to do, and I'm working on it now, is to produce OER content for that entire curriculum. And I would invite any computer teachers here, or I'd love to collaborate with people. So that's my quick presentation, because I would like to have a discussion with the time we have left.
Plenty of time, yeah, plenty of time.
Perfect. So questions, comments, join me later at the pub.
Well, thank you first of all, that's amazing. Yeah. Really wonderful journey that you've been on, and it makes me think of that saying, knowledge is power, but only when it's shared. So yeah, really wonderful. Any questions or comments or observations? Yes?
You said that the AP test had switched to C++, so is that the case that you got students to start with Python and then they were able to move to C++?
Yes. I mean, and what ended up happening, actually, it was the biggest mistake the College Board ever made. So they only stayed on C++ and then switched to Java after 4 years. Like, ooh, we goofed. But yeah, so I was able to teach the intro course in Python.
And do you still do the introduction in Python, or do you find Java's okay to start with?
So, ironically, it's kind of interesting. So this course right here, Introduction to Problem Solving and Programming, is a full year course, and I use Python with that.
Okay.
So students get a year of Python, and then object-oriented programming we had been doing with Java, but ironically, I'm now switching back to C++, which is not so bad as a second language. Right? If you've had a year of Python, and I could go into why. The goal. I view that the goal of this program is to demystify computers, because computers are becoming ever more indistinguishable from magic. Students just, you talk to it and it does stuff. And if you're going to be studying this field, you ought to come away with some sort of even intuition about what is at the root of the machine, how does it work, and what's it capable of doing. So that's leading me to be able to, I'm actually going back in time and teaching students on this thing called the Altair 8800, which was a machine from 1975 that you program with switches. So there's one course where I actually teach them how to use that computer. It was about the last time an entire computer could fit in your brain. And so and because of that, C++ is a good language to get closer to the machine.
And do you use the turtle with Python?
So, yeah, we use the turtle with Python. There's a whole bunch of, developed in the UK, there was something called the Live Wires. I met somebody who did a summer camp in the UK in 2007. Also opened another whole open source, story. It developed this incredible curriculum for a summer camp, because at the time they said they couldn't actually work computer programming into the high school curriculum here. So they did it as a summer camp. And I took that and adapted it, and we call it GASP, the Graphics API for Students of Python. And my students love that, and that's just a remix of what they developed here for that program.
Cool.
Grand, thank you. Another question here?
Hi, Andrew Smith from Wharton University. So Jeff, you've got introduction to problem solving and programming, then object-oriented programming. You've got Python and then C++. How do the students cope with the transition from Python to C, Java, or any other language?
So it's not hard. I mean, in the sense that the first thing you have to do is understand what the computer does and how it works. So then we're sequencing, we're iterating, we're branching. And you have to do that in any programming language, because the computer is the computer, and any programming language is going to make it do that. So Python is a great, gentle, powerful way to learn that. But by the time they're learning C++, they know that already. They don't have to struggle with that. Now they have to struggle with this kind of weird language, but then it's different and new, and they're able to transition.
So the syntax nuances, they comfortably sort of.
Yeah, I find that after, Python's the way to start, but after that, I mean, there's the first language is hard. The jump from the first to the second is pretty small. And, people who go into this field learn a dozen programming languages, because after a while you can pick one up in a couple of weeks.
My confession is I'm a computer scientist that used to teach Java programming to beginners. And I used to tell them, it isn't case sensitive, it's case friggin' finicky.
Right.
And whereas Python is a little bit more forgiving, so and C is, you can set fire to things with C.
Right.
It's just good to see that you're making that transition.
Well, C's the language that lets you shoot yourself in the foot, and you should when you're learning.
Yeah, usually lets you shoot yourself in the foot by the head as well.
That's true. So there's a question in the back.
Yeah, I'm also an experienced teacher in C++, wonderful language. But we also start with a Python course before we go to C++, and I want to see the other questions. Also, if you switch to another language, I think it's still important to focus on the programming and not per se on the language.
Right.
So most of the books are sort of like dictionaries of the programming language.
Right.
You should not use those. You should use examples and focus on the program and algorithm thinking. And then it doesn't really matter which language you use. And especially with C++, I think you should also focus on a subset of the language. And then people feel comfortable, and then you can go to the edge cases.
So I'm working on this right now. So how to think like a computer scientist will be staying with me for my entire career. And this is another remix of Alan Downey's original book, and it does just what I think, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm going to use it for 2 courses, so I'll use it for our object. Really, with Python, they'll be learning object-oriented programming already. So this is I'm in a really privileged position because I'm in a cohort. I have a small group of students that I get to see for 3 years. I get to know them, build relationships with them, and I can integrate the curriculum across the courses, so I don't have to think of it as these separate things. I can think, well, we already learned that here, so even though it's supposed to be in this course description, I can kind of, quickly move over that. So we're going to go through this book, the first semester, Object-Oriented Programming, the first half of it. But then for data structures and algorithms, linked lists, trees, and all that, I actually want them to learn pointers. That's another reason for going back to C++, get closer down to the machine.
Yeah, I'm from Sri Lanka, Manrata, and I would like to ask you this too, because when I'm learning in 2001, I'm an IT graduate. So first I learned Java, but completely lost with programming when I'm starting with Java. Then they asked us to, they taught us C++, that's good, then I can learn something. then after that, after graduating only, I learned Python. So I know that's a starting point. So thanks to you and the people who wrote these books, I think nowadays students have more opportunities to learn how with the beginning. So and also it's very much appreciated that your work and people who commented here, because learning like thinking as a computer scientist is very good place to start the program. Just going in the place and trying to do it. So I think thank you very much, and it's good.
So how was Python after C++ and Java?
Yeah, it's nothing.
I
Yes.
think we,
So-
Chris, you did first.
Oh,
actually,
I'm
then
sorry.
you'll- Sorry.
After you. I'm Lou Mycroft, I'm not a computer scientist, but I want to appreciate your commitment to community college. I love how you use those terms, community college in the States. I'm from English further education, which is comparable, but we've been made to be businesses for many years now. We've just financially come back into the public sector, and I hope that community college can become part of how we think of ourselves. I love that here you're all joined up, absolutely love that. And I think I just wanted to appreciate that, because unless we have people like you, Jeff, who bring your enthusiasm, which is your passion, which is just so engaging, and into FE colleges to help heal that joy and that divide. Some colleges do brilliant pathway to HE, but in many they're quite separate, and I just wanted to appreciate how you must be inspiring whole generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You know, it's great to be here. The keynote this morning, and then Jack's rules of what he wants to see with education. I mean, that's what I've been trying to do, sort of on the fringe, right? I mean, but that's what's kept it joyful for me. I mean, I have the best job in the world, and it's because I get to do all these things that I have the best job in the world. Yes.
I think we'll do next,
Oh,
actually,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
So many
Yeah,
questions,
I'm
sorry.
Yes.
Then we'll come back.
I'm from West Virginia, so practical neighbors. But
You
my
should come.
exposure to Python is through competitive robotics, and so I'm curious if you have any experience with using that as like a gateway to get kids more interested in computer science.
So there's so many things you can do with Python. Adafruit is a company that produces the Circuit Playground Express. So, you know, it's funny. We need to, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. I'm really not a hardware person, right? So students love it. I love programming because I can predict what's going to happen, and it runs every time, and I'm not dealing with tolerances and voltages and, you know, things that I find less interesting personally. I'm more of a humanities person, actually, who happens to be into the computer science. So I want to deal with text, not circuits. But there definitely is. I mean, so because microprocessors now and with Circuit Python, you can do a whole lot with robotics. And students do, so it spills over. I teach them the basic programming, and then Python has libraries for anything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Jeff, I'm also a humanities person, but I'm masquerading as a computer scientist some days. And I wasn't aware of your book, so I suppose just what a couple of the speakers said, thank you for your work, it's fantastic, and it's great that it's open source. I was using a book called Teaching Tech Together by Greg Wilson,
Okay.
a Python open access book that's absolutely wonderful. And I guess the other thing to thank you for as well is you didn't mention anything about how we're going to plug gaps in the economy and create programmers that are going to, you know, stop China, and we need more of these people in STEM and all this kind of thing. So just your passion and just making the work open is a good thing, because that just kind of, it seems like a very welcoming attitude you have to it. And what are the biggest kind of barriers you find to teaching programming to students at the moment? What are the things that they're struggling with?
So our program is an associate degree concurrent with a high school diploma. So my students come in pretty well prepared by and large, and I haven't had that many obstacles in terms of actually getting them to be successful in the intro course. Some of them go through the introductory course and say, I don't really want to do this associate degree, and they switch to something else. but most of them stay, and they tend to be very successful. I mean, you know, for me, it's fraught with contradictions, I'll be honest with you. I want to do good in the world, and sadly, most of the jobs in the sector are not doing good in the world. So it's like, ooh, what am I really doing with my life? I mean, I have to think about that sometimes. But I'm hoping to start a nonprofit called Social Justice Computing. There are so many good things we could do with the machines, but there's no money in it, right? So that's the sad part. And so it's hard to actually make a living doing good with technology. It's possible, but it's not easy.
But even small things are enough, like even making a book open access to people, it's a small thing, but it helps people peripherally in some way.
Oh yes, yeah, that part has been great. I've met people from all over the world, virtually mostly, but absolutely, it's been joyful.
Fantastic. We've got time for maybe one more question or comment. Otherwise, we can let you go slightly earlier.
All right, thank
Thank
you
you
all.
very much indeed.
Thank you.